Hi, this is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Hope you enjoyed this Game Industry Insight, a look behind the scenes at game development. And be sure to subscribe and you can pitch future video topics. Alright everybody, got a really good industry insight for you today. We're going to be talking about the major considerations when it comes to physical goods. Now, the use of physical goods varies depending upon who we're talking about. This can be something as simple as little, pop caps or buttons or anything like that, to something as complicated as statues, leather jackets, some kind of massive figurine sitting right here next to me or something like that. And with the rise of Kickstarter and even just developers getting more creative in terms of their offerings, we've been seeing physical goods become a very attractive option. When I did my recent podcast with Arthur Peterson, we talked about that very hard to explain the value that the physicality of goods can have. There is just something different about having something you can hold, something that you can display anywhere near you. This is from Ni no Kuni. This is a hardbound book that is the in-game. This is the real-life version of the in-game spell book in the game. And yes, part of this industry insight is just me showing this off. But there is just something special about having this physical good in your hand. And it makes it different from something that's digital. Having a digital wallpaper or a digital piece of artwork is great, but it's not something that you can hang up on your wall or properly display somewhere. Or all the amiibos that you can't see right now, but there are a whole lot of them back there. And again, when it comes to Kickstarter, this has become a very attractive way to really bring in some excitement. Like I just said with the Cthulhu Wars Kickstarter, that is predominantly all physical goods. But we have seen from video games as well, little figurines, t-shirts, books of any kind, a physical CD, you name it. And even for YouTubers, I know there's that popularity of having like a Teespring store, having your own merchandise. I don't know, would you folks like to have a Game Wisdom mug or something like that? But with all that said, the work that goes into physical goods cannot be underestimated, and this can easily sink a successful Kickstarter and a business if you're not properly prepared. So, for today's Industry Insight, we're going to talk about the 3 key considerations that you must factor in whenever you want to produce a physical good. And again, this can be for anything, be it your own online store, a Kickstarter, a video game, anything along those lines. But let's begin with the simple one, or simplest of the most complicated, I should say, the design. Design is, well, what are you making? You have a little guy like this. Again, my little skull. It's good I have all these little knickknacks on my desk here so you can see, so we have some good props or examples. Are you going to have a t-shirt? Anything like that. And again, the design goes beyond just figuring out what you're going to make. For each, and this is one of those parts that, depending upon what we're talking about, can vary in terms of the depth. If we're talking about a book, there's considerations in terms of what paper are you going to use. Is it going to be black and white or full color ink? Is it going to be paperback, leather bound, hardcover? Again, there are more options. I'm not a book guy myself, but I'm sure for those of you who have done this, you know what I'm talking about. There's what kind of binding you're going to use. How big is the book going to be? And not just big in terms of page count, but is it going to be a book that fits into the palm of your hand? Is it going to be a massive tome like those Diablo art books, which I should have brought one up here for this talk, and so on and so forth. And the reason why is that every little factor here is going to come back down the line. The higher the quality that you're looking for, the more it's going to cost. The more that you're going to put into it in terms of what's in the package. Like for this little guy, he came in the box for Ni no Kuni. But let's say you're designing a tabletop game, and you're going to have 20 sets of dice, all those figurines that Arthur was showing off in our video, the board itself, and so on. All that adds weight, and it all has to be designed and properly fit into the box. And weight, please keep that in the back of your mind, because that's going to come back in a few minutes. But again, even if you haven't even put together the whole game yet, this is still something you have to think about the second you start coming up with physical goods, because it's all going to flow from this point. Again, you may think that having like a little guy like this, or my book over here, that would be easier than designing a video game. But there are a lot of considerations that will go into this, and all these will have to be factored by you. And again, the decisions will vary depending upon the product you're going to make. Having a tabletop card game is going to be different than designing a full figurine that sits like 5 inches tall. And again, we can keep on going. But even at this stage of the game, you have to think about everything that's going to go into this physical good. That includes, again, the design of it, the size, the materials you're going to use, even the packaging. For people who've done tabletop games, you know that figuring out what exactly the box you're going to use is a major part of it. And like I said, that will factor into shipping in a few minutes. But you have to make sure that everything's going to fit in your box, or if you're going to ship things in solo containers, such as like the amiibos and toys like that, what kind of box are you going to make? How big is that box going to be? What kind of materials are you going to make out of that? Again, there is a lot that goes into this. But let's say you figured it out. You've got your item done, you've mocked it up, you know exactly the materials you're going to use. There's just one other big detail, and that's the second consideration: manufacturing. Now, I am sure for most developers watching this that you probably don't have a manufacturing factory built into your home or next to your game studio. And when it comes to manufacturing physical goods, again, this is going to vary depending upon what we're talking about. If you're going to make a figurine, that's going to be different than getting embroidered t-shirts or jackets. Or, again, you're only as limited as your imagination in terms of the physical good. But from what I'm going to talk, at least from the tabletop point of view, just because that's what I've heard the most from developers. But when it comes to the tabletop side of things, most manufacturing is done overseas. China seems to be the popular place for manufacturing of these goods. But even with that point, there's still more to discuss. You have to pick which factory you're going to use. Different factories will have, again, different costs associated to them. They may use different materials. They may have different times in terms of getting it out. A factory that's very busy doing other projects may not be able to get to yours for several months. And with that said, you have to look into these factories and make sure they're going to do what you want them to do. Now, when it comes to dealing with factories, this next part I've only heard from developers. So for anyone who has done this personally, please correct me if I'm wrong on any one of these points. But once you've made a deal with the factory, wherever it is in terms of whatever you're going to make, you have to send them over all the details in terms of what you're going to make, what kind of material should you use, what's the size of it, anything along those lines. If you're talking about books or paper, what kind of paper should they use, what kind of ink. Oh yes, there are different qualities of ink as well. And what's going to happen is they're going to create a template, and this is going to be or they're going to create the molds or whatever they're going to need to start automating, and they're going to probably send you a template. The template itself is essentially going to be what they're going to about to produce, again, hundreds or tens of thousands of copies of. And it's your job to make sure that's exactly what you want. Because if you find a flaw or a defect, and you've already manufactured 10,000 of them, guess what? You have 10,000 defects that you've paid for. And again, this will vary depending upon the product in question, and again, what you're trying to get out of it, and again, what materials and so on. Now, if you've made it past that point, well, congratulations. There's still one more thing you have to deal with when it comes to physical goods: distributing them. As we've talked about, and as well I'm sure many of you know, the beauty of digital for video games is that it's on the internet. Once you put up on a store shelf, or on a digital store on your own website, you send code anywhere in the world and the person has it. But when we're dealing with physical goods like our little friend here, there is a known and limited quantity of this. You can't just magically click a button and have 10,000 more of these guys pop up. And not only that, but this guy didn't just magically show up on my doorstep after I sent Bandai Namco money. It had to be shipped here. And shipping is where a lot of physical goods can come back to haunt you, as we said a few minutes ago. As I said, during the design process, you need to think about every and any considerations that's going to go into your goods. And because of that, and that's where this gets factored in, because there is a lot that goes into shipping. And for anyone, I've only done shipping in terms of small things I've sold on Amazon and eBay, but even I've had to deal with this. The weight is a very big part. As we said in the first section of today's vlog, the more you pack into your physical good, be it figurines, dice, miniatures, the board, the box itself, all that adds weight. And weight equals more cost per shipping. And then we of course have where it's traveling to. You see, here's the thing. Once the manufacturing is done, wherever you've done it, the factory is, they're not going to ship it to people. They're going to ship it to you. And that means that you are going to be getting hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands copies of everything that was manufactured. Now, some developers will handle the distributing, on their own. For smaller scale projects, like maybe just a box and a deck of cards, you and some family can hopefully handle that. But there are companies, especially in the United States, that will handle the logistics and distributing for you. Basically, you would send them all the goods. You would tell them, this goes here, here, and here. You give them the list of orders, what shippings they requested, stuff like that, and they'll handle it all for you. You're basically paying someone to take the bullet in terms of distributing all your physical goods. But getting back to the costs, shipping, depending upon where it's going or where it starts to where it's going, will also factor into things. When I ship things from here in New Jersey, there is a far different cost between shipping from New Jersey to California versus New Jersey to Canada. And then we have international shipping. And international shipping is a quagmire. Now, thankfully, I haven't had to do anything with that myself, but I've had to, of course, deal with international time zones, which are annoying, but nowhere near as bad as shipping overseas. Not only have to deal with enhanced costs for, again, the longer travel, but what if there's any tariffs or fees for shipping from one country to another? And again, this is going to be different depending upon what countries you're shipping to. This is why for a lot of Kickstarters, you will see a smart developer will list that international shipping will cost more than regular shipping, because it will always cost more. There is no way of getting around that. And that's a very important lesson for you developers if you're taking notes on this. If you're going to do international shipping, always budget for higher costs there. Now, when it comes to distributing your product, again, there's even more that can go into it. Are you going to insure the packages? Or are you going to, label them fragile, handle with care? Again, if you're just shipping like a heavy book or something like that, it's not too bad. But if you're shipping like a tiny figurines or heaven forbid you want to do some kind of glassware or something like that, you need to be really careful, because no one wants to donate to your Kickstarter and get a big box full of glass shards. And again, these are all factors that will come back to haunt you if you don't properly think about them. Now, with that said, there's still probably more to discuss. But I have fortunately not I haven't had to do anything in terms of physical goods yet, so I don't have first-hand experience. So please, if you're watching this right now, don't pose any questions down below to me like, what manufacturing should I handle? Who should I call to ship my stuff? I'm not the person to ask for that. But I do know there are a few websites and useful tools out there, which I don't know off the top of my head. Now, with that said, let's wrap things up for today's industry insight. Again, physical goods are always valued by people. They just seem to attract a higher bit of allure and ownership to people compared to digital goods. I just dropped them on the floor, so we won't be seeing them again for the rest of this video. But there's a lot that will go into this. And if you're not careful, this can easily eat up any funding you got through Kickstarter, or even just people buying this from your own website. Now, when I've spoken to indie developers in the past, a lot of them will give the simple advice of don't do physical goods. And while that is certainly the safe bet, physical goods, just like with game development, you have to do your due diligence when it comes to research. Don't decide one day before your Kickstarter, hey, let's throw in custom plates that we can sell with our game or stuff like that. This is something that you need to think about from minute one. And again, the more research and work you do, the more it will hopefully come back to serve you in the end. But even with that said, just like with game development, you can plan for 99% of any risks or things that can go wrong, and there's still that 1% chance that something can happen that's completely out of your control. When I spoke with Anthony Conta, who runs a tabletop, I think, card game company in New York, he talked about with one of their games, and this was like a few years ago, that they were all set to ship, everything was done, and then apparently it was Chinese New Year, and the factory in China decided to close for a month. Well, guess what? 30 days of them not working is going to push back your delivery time by more than 30 days, since they still have to finish production and ship it. But then what happens if there's a strike at the docks and they're not able to offload all your goods? Well, guess what? You now have even more of a delay. And again, these are things that you cannot properly account for. But unfortunately, sometimes that happens. And again, you have to weigh the pros and cons of physical goods for any major project. But with that said, we're going to wrap up today's industry insight here. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know if you have any suggestions for future vlog topics. And be sure to check back daily for more design discussions here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, have a great day. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And come back around 10 Eastern for regular streaming. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on game development, be sure to check out game-wisdom.com. Follow me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day. And to help support everything that I do, you can find me on Patreon under GWBycer or Game Wisdom. Your donations can help to keep things running, and when we hit some goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy. So, thanks again for watching, and be sure to come back for daily discussions on game design on the Game Wisdom channel.